Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm an adoptive mom of an intuitive and bright 20-year-old son, Joey, who is trying to figure out adulthood. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. This podcast helps anyone impacted by adoption, and the general public will understand adoption's complexities better after listening to. And if you're a seeker who's wanting to move forward in your life, contact me to work with you as a coach. Now, listeners, we don't usually talk about sex on this podcast directly, but today's episode is going to be about sexuality and sex work. So this episode might not be safe for work or for younger ears, but bookmark it for later because you'll want to listen to it when it's safe to do so. Today's guest is Kayla Tange, a Korean adoptee raised by Japanese American parents. Working for much of her adult life under her stage name Coco Ono, she has been an exotic dancer, performance artist, and sex worker. I was first introduced to her through her short film called Dear Mother, which is a video letter to her birth mother she had yet to meet. Toward the end of the film, Kayla narrates the following line, "And now I go out each night onto makeshift stages, and I feel the love of strangers. I dance, I smile, I make art, I feel love." And even though not all adoptees obviously will pursue a career as a sex worker, I bet this impetus to find love and empowerment is common for many adoptees. I'm very grateful that Kayla is here to help us all understand adoption's complexities better. And welcome to Unraveling Adoption. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Beth.
Well, I wonder if first, I always have adoptees that come on the show. Just tell us, your adoption story. What happened to you? How old were you? That kind of thing. Just give us the basics.
I was 6 months old. I was born in Seoul, South Korea in 1982. And I went to an orphanage prior to being adopted at 6 months old to a Japanese American family in California.
So you grew up in California?
I grew up in Central California. Mm-hmm.
Oh, in Central California. Okay.
Yeah.
And now you're in the LA area, right?
Now I'm in the LA area. Yes.
With me. Very good. And I know from the film, I watched your beautiful film, Dear Mother, and there's video of you as a little performer. Have you always found performance to be an outlet for you?
Thanks for watching the film. I did dance as a kid, and yeah, I always enjoyed it. I didn't think it was going to be such a large part of my life.
Yeah, I bet that job description wasn't one of the ones they had at career day.
No.
In elementary school.
No, and I never really knew what I wanted to do when I grew up. Okay. I thought, I like research and I don't know, maybe I'll be a lawyer or something. Like I knew I wasn't great at science, so I didn't think that I would be a doctor. So I just had no idea. So here we are.
How did you get into a career as a sex worker, as a dancer, and that kind of thing?
At the age of 39, I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism.
Okay.
And I didn't realize how this might have contributed to the trajectory of my life.
Okay.
And the lack of decision making, or I made a lot of decisions that I don't necessarily regret, but I don't think I really had a plan. And I think that's totally okay.
Yeah. So that's ADHD. You're just kind of impulsivity. And
yeah, I was interested in a lot of things. I went to school and I studied special effects makeup.
Cool.
And I did that for a few years. And then I went back to community college and I just tried so many things like photography. And I did eventually think about maybe becoming an occupational therapist because my mother was disabled growing up. And I thought that maybe that's something I wanted to do. I was really horrible at staying in school. I probably dropped out of, 4 or 5 different community colleges.
Okay.
And, it was a really hard struggle for me to finish school and to figure out what I wanted to do. And so like a lot of early 20-something-year-olds, I worked a lot of retail and service jobs.
Okay, sure.
And it was long hours because I worked several different jobs and then it wasn't that much money.
Sure.
And so I always wanted to dance since I was in high school. It was just something I thought about, but I didn't think would ever be a reality because I was really shy.
Like dance, is it?
Oh, I wanted to strip since I was in school.
Strip. Okay. Is that still the proper term to call it, a stripper or exotic dancer? What do you call it now?
I call it a stripper.
Okay. So from high school, you kind of had your eye on that. That'd be fun to do.
Yeah, I thought it would be fun, or maybe a dominatrix or something. I really liked dressing up and I really liked performing with my friends, but I was pretty shy to do it in front of strangers.
Okay.
So yeah, after being in LA for 4 years, I was working at a clothing shop with a friend of mine, and, we would dance in the mirrors. And finally, I think we just got fed up with our low pay and, our manager and all that stuff. So we just said, we're just going to go audition. And we got the job. And yeah, I just never looked back.
Yeah, I bet the money was extremely better than retail.
Really good.
And the hours.
And I was able to make my own schedule. And I then after that just auditioned at other clubs. And so I was constantly kind of working at a couple different clubs at any given time. And it was pretty great.
Yeah.
Because at that time you could just kind of come in and work and you pay, your fees and go home. And
I'm thinking for somebody with ADHD, although you didn't know that you had ADHD at the time, but that job is really kind of perfect. It's short.
It was the most perfect job. I thought, I can't believe I didn't do this sooner, because
a lot of novelty. And
it was like goal oriented.
Yeah.
You are working for yourself, essentially. I mean, obviously I've worked at other clubs where there's a schedule, but a lot of the clubs didn't have a schedule. And at the time, this was 2005. There was still a lot of money to be made in the clubs. So
I bet.
Yeah, you go in, you think, okay, this is my goal for the day, and it's cash. So you know how much you're making. And then also just the movement aspect. So you're just constantly moving and walking around. And yeah, that just really kept me entertained.
Oh, sure.
And you're constantly meeting new people. And I think for me, I really enjoy connecting with people. So it became kind of like a game, like, okay, how can I relate to this person in 5 minutes?
Okay.
And that was really cool.
And the goal was to relate, so they keep coming back. Was it kind of for monetary gain? It wasn't really to build a relationship, or was it?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I first started, obviously to connect and then sell a lap dance.
Sure.
And then, yeah, I think to connect with people on a deeper level, to have like long-term customers, that was really beneficial as someone who's an independent contractor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, especially when I started to transition into doing performance art, a lot of customers that I met at these various clubs ended up coming to a lot of these early shows that I was doing.
Okay.
And so I just felt really supported.
I bet.
In ways that I hadn't before at other jobs.
I bet.
Not that it's all great all the time.
I'm sure it's not perfect. Yeah.
There's also a lot of not the greatest working conditions. And there is a lot of other forms of harassment that you deal with.
Sure, I bet.
So, I don't want to paint it as the most perfect job in the world, but it was a great job for me.
I can see how it met your needs as a 20-something. And yeah, I can see how it checked a bunch of boxes for you. Looking back, can you see a thread between your adoption trauma and this kind of need to connect with people? Is there a link there, or am I just making that up?
I mean, I can't speak for all adopted people, but for me, and I didn't even make these connections at the time because I think, I was so young, and I moved to LA and I wanted to do something creative, but I didn't know what. And I loved connecting with people on a deeper level. And yeah, I think after maybe like a decade and a half of working as a sex worker, I did start thinking about these connections, especially Luca Fisher, my co-producer on Dear Mother, approached me to do a short documentary about the subject. And that's really when I started to think about these connections of like, why do I feel so at home in this place, where I'm able to connect with these people. I'm able to share something about myself and my creative journey. Mm-hmm. And it's like, feeling seen in this space, this unconventional workplace that, there was something really magical about that for me at the time.
Well, the whole point of that job as a stripper is to be seen, right?
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of it.
And to connect it to adoption, though, and to not feel seen, I think. To then go from feeling really seen, filled some sort of void in me. Yeah, I can't speak for everybody, but it did do that for me.
Sure, certainly. That's fascinating. And when we talked a couple of weeks ago, it was surprising to me that dancing and sex work empowers you and it makes you feel in control, which I understand, but it would not have been my initial thought. My stereotype is that, oh, these poor women, they're being coerced or this is their last resort or whatever. But from hearing you, this was definitely your choice, although you suffered some harassment and some injustices, but in general, that you feel empowered when you're doing this work. Can you help flesh that out for me and our listeners?
Yeah. And like I said, I can't speak for everybody. I don't think it's the best job for some people. Mm-hmm. And that a lot of people have had a lot of negative experiences. Mm-hmm. That's not to say I've never had negative experiences. I definitely have, but I do feel that having the agency to make money off my own body, no one else, that really shifted something in me. It was shocking to feel that way. And I don't think I expected that to happen.
And I'm particularly thinking of international adoptees and how all adoption in general really commodifies bodies. A lot of people see adoption, especially international adoption, as literally human trafficking. And so your body literally was sold. So you're taking that and flipping it on its head and say, okay, all right, I'm doing it myself now. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah. And at the beginning, I don't think that I realized that. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I don't think it was until we started to film Dear Mother that I really started to think deeply about how I felt about my body being this commodity that I had control over. Yes. Because you don't when you're a baby.
Yeah, you had no choice in the matter at all.
And I love my adoptive parents.
Sure.
I do. But we don't have a choice in the matter.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people end up with really abusive adoptive parents or...
They do. Yeah, absolutely.
It can be really bad. It's not necessarily a panacea.
No, it's not.
Even if your adoptive parents are great, you still feel displaced.
Yep.
You were displaced, right?
Yeah.
Across the world.
There is a lot of displacement feelings of loneliness, abandonment, like you just have no place in the world.
Yeah.
And so that's why I thought it was so shocking to feel like a sense of feeling at home, navigating this world that was really new to me.
Yeah, just taking the reins for yourself. Yeah, that's very fascinating. I'm learning so much from listening to you and understanding a little bit more about your story. And it helps inform me with my son. I adopted my son from Japan, and he said he feels neither Japanese nor American. Like, he doesn't fit anywhere. And it's heartbreaking from this end. And I'm sure it's heartbreaking from the person that had happened to too. It's got to be really, really tough.
Yeah, having that identity that just is kind of in limbo.
Yeah, neither here nor there, not all one or the other. And you've made a couple of trips to Korea too, right?
Yeah, I've gone twice. Yeah. I've gone to Japan. And I get asked a lot in Korea why I don't speak Korean.
I bet.
And I have to explain, and it just feels like a reminder that I don't feel like I belong there.
That you don't belong. Yeah, gosh, that must be tough. What was it like making that film? What year did you make it?
It came out in 2017. So it was being filmed throughout 2016 and the end of 2015.
Okay. And I'll put a link to it. It's available on your website. And so I'll put a link to it there. It's a really powerful, it's only like 5 minutes, but just really powerful little vignettes of you working and also you traveling and pictures of you when you were a kid and just kind of this bouncing back and forth between Korea and here. And what was your big takeaway from that experience of creating that film?
I think it really contextualized a lot of things that I had been going through and feeling. It was probably one of the most challenging projects that I've worked on. But at the same time, whenever I'm showing my work or I need to explain my practice, kind of like with a couple of pieces, that's usually one of them that I share, because there's footage of me dancing in the club. There's footage of me performing. There's footage of me running around as a kid that was seemingly very happy. There's footage of my adoptive family. So I think that it really contains a lot of things that have been very impactful on my life.
Yeah, it really gels it all together and helps us understand better what you might be going through. I thought it was really effective. It really hit me deeply.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think something about having a stage, you quoted one of the lines in that. It's just like performing for all these people, because I think off stage, sometimes I can be maybe more reserved, but there's something about being free on stage to really perform a lot of these really intense emotions.
Yeah.
Like grief.
Yeah.
It's really liberating.
Yeah. Well, and how many adoptees are actors or other types of artists? It's pretty common, I think, for people to, maybe not as a career necessarily, but to explore that avenue of release, of freedom of expression, to be some sort of performer, musician, that kind of thing. I think that's really a great way to explore those kinds of emotions. I want to ask, but I don't want to center your adoptive parents, but I'm just curious because I'm a mom. I wonder how your family treats you and has responded to your career choice. And you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
I mean, my mother passed away when I was 14.
Oh, wow. 14. So sorry.
She was very encouraging of my creative side. My mom was born and my dad was a toddler during the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II.
Okay.
And I think that generation also was concerned that my sister and I wouldn't be okay if we chose unconventional jobs.
Sure.
So there was a lot of emphasis on getting a job with a 401k and health insurance.
Something secure, right?
Yeah, and I think that further confused me when I was already confused as to what I wanted to do, even though I kind of always felt like I want to do something creative.
Yeah.
I did realize that it didn't really fit.
Yeah. I can't see you at a desk job.
I've tried it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it didn't work out.
I bet.
So my mom didn't live long enough to see me through this, this journey. But, my dad, I think he was supportive when I went to school for makeup, but I think he was supportive, but I think he was always concerned that it wouldn't be okay. And so I think at this point in my life, it's like, I've been doing this for a long time now. I think he's like, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
This is who you are,
I can imagine it would be tough for any parent just because of the cultural taboos, and this probably isn't their dream for their child, but you're showing that it can be a viable career and you can feel empowered doing it. And I know that you're working hard in the industry to address some of the injustices in sex work. And I think there's a lot to be proud of, but I can imagine, especially a Japanese American family might be like,
I think my family, they see that I haven't given up.
Yeah.
And that this is the thing in my life, is my art practice that I've continued to come back to.
Yeah.
And it's really kept me alive.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, truly, and I don't mean to be morbid, but it's really kept me alive through some dark times,
I bet. You found a unique community that probably was able to hold you during those dark times and sustain you and keep you going.
Yeah.
And it fed you in a certain way that was very important.
And I'm very grateful
for
all of my friends and family who's, part of that group.
Yeah, I bet. And I'm sure you've supported people along the way too. I'm sure it's a tight-knit community.
Because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to put yourself out there.
I'm sure.
Especially when a lot of my art practice is talking about my adoption and my worth.
Yeah.
As a person, what is my existence worth? And it's like putting yourself out there as an artist and then putting yourself out there as an adopted person is.
Yes. I agree. If you could talk to your 12-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now?
I would probably say it's going to be okay.
Nice.
And I think I would also say to just do what you want.
Yeah.
Because I think it's hard enough to try to do things with ADHD in general.
Yeah.
But it's
for sure.
Doing something you don't want to do is really challenging.
Yeah, it's like pushing something uphill. Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, with cement shoes on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it doesn't work.
So I think that my 12-year-old self had a lot of creativity and intuition that was repressed for a long time. So it took me a while to kind of uncover all that. Yeah.
So you would have told your 12-year-old to let it go. Just be creative. Do your thing.
Just keep going. Just do what you want to do.
Yeah. And do you have any advice for parents, adoptive parents or regular parents, about kids that maybe choose sex work or choose, I don't know, creative work, like your makeup work? I mean, that's not even probably what your parents had envisioned for you, right? It was like, although you said they were supportive, but what if our kids are doing something that, man, this was not what I had in mind for them? What would you tell the parents?
I had a lot of health problems in the last couple of years, and I went in for a surgery like 2022. Mm-hmm. And my nurse was this amazing woman, and we got to talking because I think she saw it in my records. She's like, "Oh, you're autistic." And she's like, "My son's autistic." Oh. And she asked me that. She's like, "How did you navigate through your life?" Or like, "What should I do?" Uh-huh. And we just started talking, and I just asked her what he's interested in and what he's good at. She said he's really good at drawing and art. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I wished that maybe I had more encouragement to go after things that I was really good at.
Yeah. Following your strengths.
I think that would have remedied a lot of like inner turmoil that I had about trying to fit into another mold that just didn't work out for me. So, I mean, I think that's the advice I can give. Yeah. Like, it may not make sense to you as a parent. Yeah. But it's like everyone's different.
Yes.
And something that fascinates your child might be totally boring, or not make any sense to you. But it's so obvious too when you see a kid or a teenager light up by a certain topic or activity. It's like, why not explore that more?
Yeah. I think for adoptive parents, we particularly have to be open to whatever our kids are going to be into, because it's not going to be what we're interested in. Probably biological kids don't always do what you think they'll do either. But with adopted kids, we don't know. We don't know what propensities you're going to have or what skills and creativity and talents you're going to have, and to just encourage whatever.
Yeah, or personality traits.
Yeah.
It's like
humor, all of that.
Yeah.
It's going to be different, to honor and respect it and encourage the strengths instead of trying to push them into what you thought things were going to be. Oh my goodness, that must be frustrating for everybody, everybody involved.
But I think even for all parents.
Yeah, just parenting in general.
I mean, I'm not a parent, so I don't know, but I think that being a child and having expectations that you can't meet, it's pretty soul crushing.
I'm sure that is extremely frustrating, very much so. Well, I wonder if you'd be willing to share the piece you wrote in a book called Horrorephobia. It's a compilation by a bunch of people who work in sex work. And I thought your chapter in that book was absolutely gorgeous and inspiring and illuminating. And if you'd be willing to read it in your own voice, I think that would be really special. And I'll put a link to the whole book in the show notes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I was really honored that Lizzie Borden who put this anthology together, asked me to be a part of this. So this is a piece I wrote after I came back from Korea in 2011.
Okay.
It's called A Forest. I'm standing, barely, slumped over the jukebox, back turned to the stage, one arm perched on the glass, supporting my body, shifting between one foot and the other, legs like jelly, hurting yet hovering, back, forth, my body a pendulum, my eyes fixated on the Jägermeister sign. There's a sound of salt crunching on the rim of glass, the shuffling of heels on hardwood floor, followed by, thank you for your tips. Flipping through the 99 CDs feels like an impossible chore. I try to reach deep within myself to pick a song, any song that will move my body enough to exercise my despair and reel in the monetary love from strangers. I choose a go-to, The Cure from 17 Seconds. It's one of my favorite albums, different from the others in its understated, melancholic tones. 10 p.m. Some regulars sit at the end of the bar. They tell jokes. I laugh. Usually I have the script of most evenings down to a science, mustering connections out of thin air like clockwork. But now, when I needed that magic the most, is not one of those times. I desperately wanted to vanish. I am in such a daze that everything is on autopilot. Sometimes dancing is like that. When it's good, it's great. It feels familiar yet new. But tonight, I'm tired of the world and the persona I've constructed to mentally survive. How was Korea? I hear a faint voice say behind my back. Dread creeps in. I should have had a generic response prepared for this, but I don't. Happy birthday to you, they sing. My second day in Seoul. It's my birthday. I'm surrounded by 17 other adoptees from who I met the day before. We're in a restaurant that serves barbecue, but not the kind with the girls on the table. They've ordered me some dessert from the menu. Although strangers, we get right down to business. How old were you when you were adopted? Were you in an orphanage or fostered? Did you come with the hope of finding your birth parents? The smell of galbi fills the air. Fast friendships are forged over food and displacement. Normally, I'm great at switching seamlessly between my internal monologue and my client-facing persona, but at this moment, I feel weak. I don't want to be at work in this condition, but I fear that if I don't put a schedule in, I'll be punished with fewer shifts next week. And after 3 weeks in Korea, I desperately needed the money. I spent around $6,000 on one of the most eye-opening and disappointing trips of my life. The happiness and sadness of some days was nearly impossible to contain. Being back in the States is painful. Painful is an understatement. I turn around, long black hair flowing, as I paint a smirk on my face, walking, wobbling towards the stage as I pass by a regular customer. I'm friends with his girlfriend. She must have told him why I was away. It was great, I say, as if the person speaking from inside me were someone else. There's 24-hour shopping and the city feels so safe to walk around. A look of disbelief crosses his face. But what exactly does he expect? For me to lay myself bare right in the club, right before I walk on stage to dance my abandonment away? I don't trust anyone to hold my despair. It's too fresh, still bleeding, not refined. Our hotel in Seoul is central to everything. We even have a tiny washing machine in our room. After unpacking, I go off on my own to explore. The smell of street vendors making fresh candies and fried foods on sticks fills the air. I feel proud to be from here. The pavement is different from Los Angeles. I feel smooth stones between my feet, and I want to walk forever. Jet lag is uncanny, but in this case symbolic. The show must go on, despite my crumbling sense of self, and limbs weak enough to float away. My body aches from my eyes to my ankles. My black patent leather stripper heels feel like a custom pair of cement shoes, far from the hollowed-out plastic they're made of. On any other night, my shoes are my support. They make me feel strong and unshakable, sexy and limitless. This is not one of those nights. On stage, in a daze, doing slow motion hair flips, spinning, offering an intense gaze, followed by a coy look, then a quick turn. I hear her voice calling my name. The sound is deep, in the dark. I dance like a ghost, hardly registering the floor under my feet. I manage to fool the audience into thinking I'm desirable, confident, insatiable. In reality, my soul aches, and I'm disoriented by my own thoughts. How could I tell them how deeply lonely it felt to be among a sea of people who looked just like me? I never met my mother, but sometimes I feel her in my bones, in my blood. We are the same, despite the 19 years between us in age. In her translated letters, written to me before I went to Korea, she hinted at being wild, at having made choices that shamed her family. I never set out to live my life to redeem her buried sexual freedom, but somehow it chose me. Suddenly I stop, but I know it's too late. Who am I anyway? I almost grasped an answer before it slipped through my fingers. I almost faced who I was, but she slipped through my fingers. My set ends. I curl around the stage, sweeping my money from one side to another, stopping and pausing to thank patrons, attempting to humanize myself in the process. I collect my tips from the customers with their prying eyes and mouths. I don't think anyone can tell I'm slowly dying inside as they stare at me, their tongues hanging out of their mouths like cartoon animals. How could I tell them that my mother had an opportunity to meet me, but instead chose to abandon me for the second time? In the cab back to my hotel, I sobbed uncontrollably. She couldn't do it. It was too emotional for her, the social worker relayed as she steered me out of the agency's offices. This statement plays in my head over and over. In the seat next to me lies a bouquet of flowers and a photo album I made of the years of my life she missed. The time elapsed from receiving this news from the social worker to stepping in the cab must have been mere minutes, and yet my whole life flashed before my eyes. Do I even exist? At the jukebox, I'm setting up my second set. My boss comes by and places her hand on my back. Did you meet her? She inquires. Why is she being so nice to me? I don't trust her. It didn't happen. I respond while I'm staring into the light of the jukebox. She couldn't do it. My skin crawls. Why this conversation? Why now? I can't handle being in my physical and emotional body at once. The air is stagnant and the music is so loud. The sound of distorted laughter and clapping feels thick as I swallow in discomfort. How can I tell her it feels like when I lost my virginity? It's the second time I've felt this different, enough that when I look in the mirror, I think that others must notice as well. But it's not the same. It's a different kind of exposure. Very real, in the flesh, the kind that feels exploitative, the kind that can be bought. Here I am for your viewing pleasure, possessed by pleasure and pain. In the dressing room, I count my money. It was a good set. I've missed the sound of sweeping up dollars, missed the way they felt in my hands. I've missed unfolding them and neatly facing them the same way. The security guy used to comment on this when I changed them in at the bar. You have respect for your money. I didn't know what he meant by that, but it's satisfying to see them neatly folded, and easier to know if I've met my quota for the evening. Back at the hotel in Seoul, I'm met with open arms by the 17 other adoptees waiting for my happy reunion. I have nothing. I can hardly face them. I bow out of group lunch and dinner that day and do what feels the most healing, exploring the city alone. For hours I walk until my feet blister. Being in Seoul is surreal. I see my face in others, and yet I can't communicate with words. When it's brought up by shop owners, I mumble, I'm adopted. They throw their arms around me and cry. My mother hid in an unwed mother's home with me. She didn't tell my birth father that I existed. I try to feel him in my bones, skin, and spirit, given that he's a part of what made me too. I'd like to understand his side of the story. My mother felt she was doing us a favor so I could have a better life, so he could have a better life. She put herself in a state of loneliness I can't even imagine. I wonder if sometimes she has a better life. Outside between sets, I light a cigarette. The act of inhaling calms me down. The boss doesn't like it when we take smoke breaks, but at this point, I don't care what the punishment is. I need the release. Though it means I'm forced to make small talk with customers who are likewise out smoking. My face already hurts from fake smiling, but at least the cigarette keeps me occupied. Back inside in the lap dance booth, I could use extra cash, but I'd rather be anywhere but here. My body sways, and he thinks I'm being sexy for him. I'm barely standing, leaning on his shoulders for support, but I make it appear as if I'm angled for closeness. Manufacturing intimacy is a defense mechanism for me. It's become second nature. Steve is a regular. He smells like cigarettes, but so do I. I made the mistake of adding him on my personal Facebook page, and now every time I see him, he makes some comment that suggests he knows me. I could tell he's high right now because he can hardly talk, but he spits something out. I read your blog. You're so dark. The words sputter and slide sloppily from his mouth. I feel kicked while already down. I've danced through breakups, through the deaths of family and friends, through tears shrouded by my hair, and now through this. It's as if the movement is some sort of conjuring, a merging of my body and my mother's, as if I'm dancing away her repression, her shame. I dance when I don't know what else to do, a somatic response to everything that I have no words for. No language is needed, no explanation. I can be in my body, and in that moment, I feel safe. I am autonomous, haunted, consumed, reckless, and abandoned in this space, this underground, where feelings are sin and feeling is foreign. But it's here where people pay to witness my pain night after night. I'm running towards nothing again and again and again and again.
Thank you. Thank you for reading that, Kayla. There's some really big truth bombs in there. And it's just, right?
Yeah, it's still hard for me to read after.
I'm sure. I'm feeling for you so deeply.
It started as a blog entry while I was in Korea. I kept a blog every day while I was there.
Oh, okay.
So that story is kind of like that blog in one essay.
Yeah. Well, your essay is really powerful, and it helps us all understand what you're going through, what you continue to go through, and the various pains that have affected you and brought you to where you are today. And I'm glad you're still doing what you love doing, and that you're finding safe ways to do that and make things as safe as possible for other people. And I wish you well with your health and whatever your next steps are. I'm on your team. I'm on your side.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, if people wanted to get a hold of you, are you open to that? And what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, I guess you can put my email and website and Instagram in the notes with the rest of the links and film.
Okay, so I'll put the chapter, I'll put your email, I'll put your website and your Instagram. And what's your website, just so you can put it on audio?
It's KaylaTange.com.
Okay, KaylaTange.com.
Yes.
But if you're driving or something now, listeners, go look it up. I put everything in the show notes for you. Just look either below or next to the episode where you pushed play, and you'll find all of these notes.
Yeah, thank you for including all of that. This is really meaningful projects that I've been a part of. So
yeah, and you're still doing performance art, right?
I'm still doing performance art. I do a lot of visual art right now.
Nice.
I took a break because of my health issues, but I can't stop. Slowly, creeping back in, but, little by little.
Your creativity is unlimited. Let it go. Go, go, go. That's great. Well, go look up Kayla. And while you're there, go look up Unraveling Adoption at unravelingadoption.com. Find all the resources that we have there. And thank you all for listening. Please make sure and share this episode with anyone that you think might resonate with Kayla's story. And also, it helps us greatly if you could rate and review the podcast on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Even if that's not where you listen to us, it still works. So those help us a lot and help get the episodes out to more people. Well, thanks again for listening, everybody. Kayla and I want you all to stay safe.